Hello everybody and welcome back. Tonight's account comes from the northeast of England and it happened in 1972. And it's a typical northern town surrounded by countryside and golf courses and nature reserves and the usual. Terraced houses and semi-detached and the usual children playing out on dark nights under the street lights, playing knock-a-door run and rally evo, and these particular children were playing Kirby. And a gentleman got in touch with me after he heard me chatting with the British Bigfoot team and Nathan Rio on Utah Sasquatch. And he said when we were chatting, we were talking about the British accounts, and something we were talking about triggered a memory for him that happened in 1972 when he was out playing with his friends. And his name is Phil, and he contacted me by email yesterday, and this is what he had to say. If my memory serves me right, Deborah, the incident happened one September evening around 9 p.m. in 1972. I lived in a small area that is village-like, but it's actually on the edge of a north-eastern town. And just a couple of 100 yards away from my old home is the countryside. There are woods and streams and farmlands, and the main railway line that connects the south to the north of England is very close by, along with a large golf course and a river that is only a short walk away. Sadly, more housing developments have taken place recently, and the countryside is slowly moving farther and farther away. But on that night, back in 1972, my three friends and I were playing with a football in one of the streets when the incident occurred. It was just a cold, damp autumn night. This particular street might seem odd to many, as it comprised of a set of terraces on one side and a set of semi-detached on the other. On the side of the semi-detached had a pavement, and the side that had the terrace houses didn't. And all of the homes had a small front garden bordered by waist-high brick. And the home that I'm speaking about was the very end of the semi-detached and the last house before the countryside began. And as a side note, my father lived on this street as a boy, and he told me that where the semi-detached houses stood now, at the end of the war, was countryside. And like many towns, our town had just expanded. And it was dark on the street that night, and the only illumination came from the old-fashioned gas lights that were situated at the bottom of the street. And this was a long time ago, and some of the homes still lit their rooms with interior gas lights. So with that in mind, one can appreciate that vehicles were not as plentiful as now, and what we were up to would not be disturbed by any passing cars. And I think the shout of "car" is a very familiar shout to most of us children who grow up in the north. Well, we were playing a game named Kirby, and it's played across the UK, which involves attempting to hit the corner of the pavement curb with the ball to score points. One of my friends, an older boy called Kevin, who sadly passed away a few years ago, kicked the ball in the right direction, but it bounced awkwardly and flew off at an angle over a privet hedge into an elderly couple's garden. Well, being the culprit who lost the ball, street rules apply, and Kevin was the one who had to retrieve it. He opened the gate quietly and stepped into the garden behind the chest-high hedge and disappeared from sight. We waited, and we assumed he was just messing about, and we could hear grunts and sounds that it sounded like the ball was stuck in a bush and he was struggling to get it out. And it must have been only about 30 seconds later when we finally gave up waiting and went into the garden to see where Kevin was. And there he was, on his back, in the shadows of the hedge. Kevin was lay there moaning. He looked terrified, and as we reached for him, he said, "I've just been beaten up." Of course, we looked around to see who else could be hiding in the dark garden, but there were no bushes, there was just nothing, just a dark night in a shadowy garden. The garden comprised of, like, dug over soil, and it was about 12 feet long by 7 feet wide, and a high wooden fence that separated all of the gardens from each other, and a privet hedge bordered it from the street. And the only other exit, apart from the gate that we'd come through, was where the path went up beside the house to connect with a rear garden, and from there you could access the open expanse behind it. And we'd seen nobody else come or go. The owners of the house had their curtains closed, and I doubt either of the elderly couple had hidden there for half an hour or so under a damp bush, waiting for one of us to kick the ball over the privet and end our game. Kevin looked dishevelled. He told us he hadn't been punched or kicked, just manhandled, sort of pushed out of the way by a stranger that had been hiding low behind the privet edge. When asked what he looked like, because one assumes it's a male in these situations, Kevin's answer was alarming. He looked at us and he said it had hairy teeth. And that was the total of his description. We can assume whoever this person was had arms and legs, as he'd manhandled Kevin in that way and pushed him to the ground. And he'd also fled the scene. And being a couple of years older than myself and the other ones, we didn't really press him further on it. And I can state that I knew Kevin all his life, and he was far from having an over-eager imagination. He clammed up, and we didn't push the matter any further. We didn't ask him any questions. And just like kids all over the world, a few minutes later we were back playing our game. And all was forgotten about this weird encounter with the man with hairy teeth. A few years later, I sat in the local pub with Kevin and jokingly brought up the incident of our youth, and I was surprised at the serious look on his face. He assured me that it did happen, and considering he was actually still lived in the area now, and he was an adult and a parent, it made him think about the incident quite a lot and what had happened in the gloom of the hedge that night. And though this time he did go into more detail, and he did explain what he saw when he went over the hedge that night. He didn't see any eyes, and he added that it really annoyed him because you can tell a lot from someone's eyes. He couldn't say he felt close during the tussle, nor if a stranger smelled strange in any way. Although being in a dark, dank place under the hedge would just, I don't suppose you would smell that anyway. The only thing he kept saying was that he saw hairy teeth. And when I asked him to describe those teeth, he just struggled to come up with the words. And he just said there was hair and teeth. I suggested that whoever had obstructed him from retrieving the football may have had a beard. But he just shrugged and said, "No, I don't know." As I said, Kevin wasn't one for imagination or conjecture, and he was a man of few words. And then time moves on. Living in another area of the town by now, but not too far from where the incident had occurred, my wife and I took a walk along a country lane that would bring us out back at my old stomping ground. This was around 2010, and we were getting to the age where, we were thinking back on memories and memory lanes, and we decided to go for the walk. I have heard that Kevin had passed away a few years before, and after chatting to his widow at her front gate for a while, we carried on our way. We spoke to a couple of people that I'd grown up with, and when we came across a family that we also knew, began talking about the old days and how things used to be. But I was surprised when my friend's wife answered an indifferent question, really, about how things were now, that the area were busier, more people, more traffic, that kind of thing. She remarked that the kids were still up to their usual pranks, and from time to time, playthings, vegetables and shrubs would disappear from her garden. Her husband agreed and added that his allotment garden had taken a few hits from someone he suspected was after sabotaging his prized vegetables. With their own children attempt to interrupt, they continued to say in a resigned tone that it was all part of life and, But when one of her children, a small boy around 8 or 9, chimed in and said, "It wasn't the kids, it was that man with hairy teeth," the lad grabbed my focus. But not wanting to raise any alarm bells and make a big deal of the boy's comment, I looked quizzically at his mother and asked what he meant. And she explained that for a few years now, when the kids in the area were out and they'd come in from being outside, doing whatever kids doing in the evenings, they'd occasionally mention they'd seen the man with hairy teeth. And that's it. That's where it ended. I felt it was inappropriate at the time to interrogate the child about what he had said or what his friends had seen. And I'd kind of forgotten all about the incident and just kind of put it down to a local myth. But was it? Or is it? An unshaven tramp that has quietly gone about for over 40 years, nightly visiting the gardens of a small community, watching children play Kirby and pushing some to the ground and running off? Or was it one of your guys, Deborah? Or was it something we just don't fully understand yet? Well, I can't really answer that, Phil, I'm afraid. But I'm sure that if somebody in the area hears this, that they would get in touch as well, and maybe we might find, a little hint. And I've myself have spent many a long dark evening here in the north of England playing Kirby and Kickball Run. The area I had my encounter was so similar to this, you could mistake them. This account also brings to mind the Evesham weeping creature, also seen at night by a child coming in from play. Remember, on the shorter nights it can be dark by late afternoon in the north, and there are many accounts where the area is between town and field. That area crops up a lot where it's a town on the edge of the countryside. All of the usual signs apply here, and for all I can make no call on what the children saw that night, it is so similar to many of the other accounts on the map that one day Phil may just get his answers. Well, hopefully he will. And until next time, thank you very much. Goodbye.